All right, this is going to be the second reading. We just read an article about basically diaspora ethnic fighting that we still see to this day. But we're reading an article on diaspora ethnic fighting during the Garvey movement after the war years or during the war years. Now we're reading a book on race first, which is the invention of Tony Martin. It's a phrase that he believes uh, captures Marcus Garvey's philosophy, and yeah, he's a respected scholar. Now I'm gonna try and speed through this, get better with time. But the last document was only 23 pages, and it took so long, maybe a couple hours to get through. But the classic study of the Garvey movement, the truth has been finally been told. Honorable Thomas W. Harvey, late President General UNIA, as close to a definitive study of Marcus Garvey as we have seen. John Henry Clark. And the title, Race First, the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Tony Martin, the new Marcus Garvey Library, number 8. On the back page, Black Studies / History, Race First, the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and his Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Marcus Garvey Library, number 8. The most thoroughly researched book on Garvey's ideas choice, the most comprehensive and definitive work on the brilliant African nationalist leader Lambe Brath, New York Amsterdam News, a well-conceived, exhaustively researched, skillfully executed book. Kenna Ray McNeil, Journal of Negro History. In 1977, at an international convention of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, Race First was accepted as the most authentic documentation of life and works of late Honorable Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, Garvey's Voice. Tony Martin is professor and chairman of the Black Studies Department at Wellesley College, Massachusetts. Now that's incredible. This is almost at least fit. This book is 1977. That was 50 years ago, almost. And so this book has been out there, and we're reading this book because to examine particularly the things that caught my eye, that I think is the most important, was that Garvey was creating royalty titles like Candace, and there's basically an African, call it tribal society or royal society. But going forward, that's what inspired our documents, our Constitution, to even reduce the words from African and Black to change the words to indigenous words, where we're talking about there has to be a rites of passage for you to even get inside the organization, to get inside the government. There has to be a thorough rites of passage, a thorough citizenship, nationalization, identity process, rites of passage ritual. There has to be a thorough system to avoid the fighting that came about over identity and identity politics that we still see to this day. So far we haven't had any fights in our movement. We've had a lot of tense conversations over the phone, but yeah, we're going for a royal society with rites of passage ritual, just like there's Native American tribes, there's African tribes that do it. So it's we're taking that right, you know. So okay, the Majority Press Inc. Let me see. This is a PDF file, so I want to make sure I'm reading it. Okay. Race First, the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Tony Martin has taught at Wellesley College, Massachusetts since 1973. He was tenured in 1975 and has been a full professor of Africana Studies since 1979. Prior to coming to Wellesley, he taught at University of Michigan Flint, the Cipriani Labor College Trinidad, and St. Mary's College Trinidad. He's been a visiting professor at the University of Minnesota, Brandeis Brown University, and Colorado College. He also spent a year as an honorary fellow at the University of West Indies. So I'm going to, just from experience, since this is going to be on video, I'm going to try and skip some of the information that I don't think, people could pause and watch the video if this footnote Tony Martin's accomplishments. I think people could read that by themselves if they want. I'm going to try and speed through this a little bit faster than the past. Now you can see the new Marcus Garvey Library, and that's the cover page. You can pause it if you want to read through that. More, I guess, footnotes to my parents. Other books by Tony Martin. Then it has a table of contents. Okay, I'm going to try. So there's table of contents. Basically, there's 12 chapters. Let's see how we can break 12 chapters. Okay. Now, some of them are like 70 pages, 50 pages. Okay. I'm going to see how we can break this up. Yeah, I think we'll see how we can break this up. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. I think 20 pages is a good aim, just how this PDF is set up. Okay, preface. The book is based on simple premise that no one could have organized and built up the largest black mass movement in Afro-American history in the face of continuous onslaughts from communists on the left, black reactionaries on all sides, and the most powerful governments in the world, and yet be a buffoon or a clown or even an overwhelmingly impractical visionary. Distortions are not new to Afro-American history, but one would be hard put to find a major black figure to have suffered more at the hands of historians and commentators. This study attempts to treat Marcus Garvey and the UNIA with the seriousness and respect which they deserve. After a brief biographical introduction, the study examines the major features of Garvey's ideological outlook as they manifested themselves both in theory and in practice. The last and longest portion of the book is taken up with an examination of the formidable battles which the UNIA was simultaneously involved in at various variety of fronts. Despite the personal animosities generated by these struggles, they were essentially ideological conflicts, for Garvey's revolutionary nationalism was perceived as a threat by a wide spectrum of opponents, had little affection for each other outside of their common desire to crush Garvey and extirpate his movement. Against all these disparate forces, Garvey prevailed, and it was only with his deportation from the U.S. that his organizational grip in the black masses in North America and to varying degrees elsewhere slowly began to loosen, even as ideological legacy continued to be a major force in black communities. Okay, this is a point I'd like to linger on, that this organization or this government in exile was based on Garvey's presence. Like when the United States is not based on George Washington's presence, the United Nations is not based on, I guess, Theodore Roosevelt's or Eleanor Roosevelt's presence. So when we talk about government, we have to have a structure that's not based on idol worship or Messiah worship or martyr worship. So that's one of the things we have an issue with. But we're working on a decentralized ID system where everybody can create their own, basically, extended family or clan or branch of a movement or of a government, and they can be vetted by their peers and by the continent. We all exchange. Continent have to vet themselves even. So we're working on an ID system where it will be decentralized branches. ID number 1 will have their own branch. ID number 2 will have their own branch, or be able to create their own branch if they have a disagreement. But the Constitution will be the binding factor. Constitution, the emblems, the programs we have envisioned will be built out, but it does rely on the website, which we're working on, and the ID number system. It's all tied to the number system, which is it's paralyzing at times, but we're working on that. Even then, his ideological, a large number of people helped me in a large number of ways, big and small, during the years that this book slowly took shape. Thank them all. Let me skip through that. So he's just thanking Uh, Dominica, UNIA. That's interesting. Dominica, the small island of Dominica. Huh. That's interesting. I think he says that Dominica, UNIA, that small island has Garveyites. Queen Mother Moore saw Garvey in New Orleans, 1922. Colonel Von Dinsey of New York, of the New York Vanguard local, talking about the African Legion. Okay, he thanks a friend of Kwame Nkrumah, Schomburg Center. Okay, so that's just a list. To the fools in Harlem who broke into my car, ripped off my first 6 months' notes, and forced me to start over my research, I say, why didn't you take the spare tire instead, man? Huh. See? So now he's saying he was sabotaged. Why didn't you take the spare tire instead, man? Who breaks into a car and steals notes? See? June 1975. So this book is, shoot, it's at least 50 years old, the writing of this book. It's got to be around 50 years old. It's got to be about 50 years old if it took him 2 years. That's interesting. Okay, introduction. Well, we're already at 11 minutes. So I do have work, so I'm going to see how much we can get through. Let me see. Yeah, I'm wondering how much of this is something that could be put into practice. The introduction itself. Wow, the introduction ends on page 21. Basically ends at page 21, and I'm on page 3. Wow. Okay. What do I care about death in the cause of the redemption of Africa? I could die anywhere in the cause of liberty. A real man dies but once, a coward dies 1,000 times before his real death. So we want you to realize that life is not worth its salt except you can live it for some purpose. And the noblest purpose for which to live is the emancipation of a race and the emancipation of posterity. History records that slaves, by virtue of their experiences and the knowledge gained in captivity in strange lands, have eventually become masters of themselves and in times enslaved others. Let us therefore use adversity as others have done, take advantage of every opportunity where there is none, make it for yourself, and let history record that we toiled laboriously and courageously we worked to live gloriously. Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was born in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica on August 17, 1887. His childhood was deeply rooted in the peasant environment which largely surrounded him. He once described an uncle for whom he sometimes worked as a sharecropper. His own parents also engaged in small-scale peasant farming. Garvey was not a typical peasant experience, however. His father, a descendant of the Maroons, Jamaica's African ex-slaves who successfully defied the slave regime, was also a skilled tradesman, a stonemason. Garvey's background further distinguished him from the typical peasant in that his father possessed a library among whose volumes Garvey developed an early taste for reading. His childhood was characterized by an adequate elementary education supplemented by private tutors and Sunday school. His leadership ability seems to have manifested itself from the very beginning, for his physical prowess gave him a position of eminence among his peers. At the age of 14, by which time he had already become apprenticed to a local printer, Garvey left school. 2 years later, he moved to Kingston, Jamaica's capital, where he obtained work. So he left school at 14 for apprenticeship in business. By the time he was 18, he had achieved what later described an excellent position as manager of large printing establishment. He was a manager by 18. This was an outstanding achievement, making Garvey the youngest foreman printer in Kingston, at a time when many foremen were still being appointed from Great Britain and Canada. Participation in a strike during which he consented to lead the workers despite assurances of favor from management cost him his job. He then obtained new employment with the government printery. In Kingston, Garvey quickly immersed himself in the and intellectual and political life of the city. By 1909, his political involvement had brought him into the National Club, organized by lawyer and Legislative Council member Sandy Cox. Garvey was elected one of the assistant secretaries of this club, which sought to combat privilege and the evils of British colonialism on the island. In 1910, Garvey embarked on his first of many wanderings in foreign lands. He went to Costa Rica, where he worked for a while as a timekeeper on the United Fruit Company banana plantation and as a laborer. On pier at Port Limon, edited a paper, La Nation, harassed the British consul concerning his non-protection of the many non-British West Indian laborers working there. Was arrested for urging workers to fight for better conditions, and eventually expelled from the country or left to escape the authorities. He continued for the next year or so to wander through Latin America, going to such places as Panama and Ecuador, where West Indian workers had migrated in large numbers in search of work. He observed the universal degradation of the black race, worked intermittently to finance his travels, started another small paper in Colón, Panama, and agitated among black workers. A black worker in Colón at the time remembers meeting Garvey around 1912 as he addressed the predominantly black Colón Federal Labor Union. There is a possibility that Garvey may have stopped briefly, perhaps in transit as a seaport somewhere in the United States during this period. From Central America, Garvey returned briefly to Jamaica, and by the autumn of 1912, undeterred by a lack of money, he was in England, where his only surviving sister, Indiana, was working as a governess. In England, he indulged his love of public speaking at Hyde Park Speaker's Corner, was a regular visitor to the House of Commons, and worked for the Africa Times and Orient Review, the foremost Pan-African journal of the day. He found the time to visit Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy, Spain, Austria, Hungary, and Germany. Garvey said later that he attended some lectures in law at Birkbeck College of the University of London. By July 1913, Garvey was not surprisingly almost destitute, and he applied for government assistance. Possibly because of his job at the Africa Times and Orient Review, however, his article for the magazine was published in October issue. He was not able to eke out an existence for almost another year. By May 1914, when he was probably again without employment, the Anti-Slavery and Aborigines Protection Society intervened on his behalf, dispatching him to the colonial office with an offer of a contribution from the society if the colonial office could put up some money to repatriate him to Jamaica. Early in June, the society informed the colonial office that Garvey was endeavoring to raise a fund to meet passage money and offered to match equally any amount the colonial office preferred. Garvey managed to do without the largest of these two agencies, however. He succeeded in raising his fare home and left England on June 17, 1914. Garvey's first sojourn in England was of great importance to his career. The workings of British democracy made a lasting impression on him, and like later generations of visitors from the colonized world to the metropolis, he noted the contrast to the autocracy which the very same colonizer maintained in the tropical dependencies. He was often to call in the years to come for an extension of British justice to the colonies. England gave him an opportunity, too, to enhance his already wide knowledge of the worldwide sufferings of black people. In the pages of the Africa Times and Orient Review, there appeared regularly articles by and about such leading black figures as Booker T. Washington, Edward Wilmot Blyden, John Edward Bruce, W.B. Du Bois, and William Ferris, to name but a few. Some of these would before long be his associates in the U.S. Garvey also came into contact with Black Sea men and students whose sufferings he observed, and with the many people of color who visited the offices of the journal, and the fact that the journal combined a Pan-African outlook with wide coverage of Middle and Far Eastern nationalist struggles and indeed all anti-colonial struggles contributed further to Garvey's growth and influenced his future outlook. Garvey arrived back in Jamaica on July 15, 1914, his head bristling with ideas on making a living and founding a racial movement. To secure the former, he tried selling greeting and condolence cards and monumental tombstones. To secure the latter, he formed 5 days after his arrival the Universal Negro Improvement and Conservation Association and African Communities Imperial League. The title bore testimony to enlarged visions brought about by his travels and the fear which he never relinquished that weak races were doomed to slavery and possibly extinction. In this regard, he wrote, for the last 10 years, I have given time to study of condition of the Negro here, there, and everywhere, and I have come to realize that he's still an object of degradation and pity the world over, in the sense he has no status socially, nationally, or commercially, with a modicum of exception in the United States of America. Okay, so we're going to pause there. We got to the point where he founded the UNIA ACL, and we see. I want to note that two things, at least the British justice claim. Like he's traveled Europe and he saw that the British justice worked in Britain, but didn't extend to the diaspora or the Black diaspora. So it's like it's a contradiction. You're building an African empire and it's a royal society, and you're saying the model should be British justice. So that's one of those contradictions that kind of blew up, but or collapsed things. People have the British justice idea, and then it eventually becomes an integration, or leaves an opening for integration and of the tribal kingdoms and destruction of them. Wakanda forever. So it's this is then you also see that he was in contact with very much in contact with what was it called, the Anti-Slavery and Aborigines Protection Society. So that's that combines the rights of the Black diaspora and slavery, who experienced slavery, and the Australian blacks, the Aborigines as they're called. So the you could call them the Australian Africans, or the black. It's like basically you're seeing that he has connection with the Australian black people, the Aborigines Protection Society. So they were being colonized too. So he was very aware of them, and he even applied to the same protection agency as the Australian Aborigines. That was a white controlled protection society. So yeah, kind of like the Quakers, but they're fighting, I guess, to ease up on the Australians or colonize them a different way, the Aborigines. So then we end up with the title of the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement and Conservation. So when you're talking about conservation, you're talking about organized marriages, conserving black people. Then you combine it with African communities, imperial. You're talking about an empire of communities coming together, whether it's ethnic organization here, that could be a community, or it could be a physical community, as like let's say Los Angeles, or a neighborhood, East Jacksonville, West Jacksonville. So now you get the organization and the physical locations coming together with the Africa, and they're forming an empire. So this kingdom is sponsoring us and teaching us in Africa how to do things. We're teaching them about race and how the tribes should work together and the kingdom should work together. The clans, we're all teaching each other back and forth, constant dialogue about how things should be. There's supposed to be a university system or education system. Maybe it's not physical. We have the apprenticeship systems. Even Garvey was an apprentice. So, that's a big part of the Igbo culture, the apprenticeship system. And a lot of times, people might need to go into stock market today, U.S. stock markets, to replace their jobs or to get the capital and the control of these companies. So and then building our own companies. It's a wide range of things going on. But I'm going to stop it here because if I stop it here, where the PDF is about 10 pages or 220 pages, so this is like we're one out of 22 entries in. So I'm gonna stop it here, and yep, I'm gonna stop it here. Thanks for your time.